Hi.
Well, Joseph really has extraordinary experience in terms of career pivot, so that's why I invited you today. So could you please tell us, just introduce yourself a bit?
So my name's Joseph Roberts, Joe, all my friends call me. I'm from Colwyn Bay originally, which is on the north coast of Wales, and nothing very interesting happened whilst I was at school. But during school, I had the opportunity to learn Mandarin as a scholarship. So I was one of the first students at a pre-university level in the UK to get a scholarship to go and learn Chinese in China. So I lived in Shijiazhuang for a year, a city south of Beijing, and it's made my entire working career rather strange. So
That sounds amazing. 'Cause it seems that you didn't pay for your Chinese studies, but you got for free.
I did pay for it when I got back. My degree was paid for, but it was cheaper because it was shorter because I already learned a year of
Yeah.
Chinese, right? I
Yeah.
live in Anglesey now. I live in Llanfair Pwllgwyngyll Gogerich and Drobl Santa Celia Gogogoch.
Yeah.
I live in the town with a long name, but most people call it Llanfair PG. So
Is that Welsh?
yes, but it's also the name was made for tourists. So it's Llanfair Pwllgwyngyll, which is long, right? But then they made it really, really long, so people from all around the world can come to Llanfair Pwllgwyngyll and visit. But it
Yeah, and I
works.
pretend. I pretend I
Yeah.
can't stand.
It's like
It's
Biang
not.
Biang Mian. It's like that kind of.
Biang Biang
Yeah,
Mian is from Xi'an.
they didn't have to write it like that, but they did.
Yeah, I can tell I couldn't write it actually,
I
but I'm
learned how
sure that
to.
that's really the most challenging industry I would do so far. Lots of
Oh,
languages are involved.
it's my party trick. I'm like, I can write Biang.
Biang.
Yeah.
Hello, Joe. Joe is
Hi.
my friend.
Hi,
By the
Joe. I
way.
met you in the tech week.
Oh, really? Very nice. Oh, yes. We play VR headset together. So, you didn't get Chinese studies for free, but you paid part of that. Why would you choose Chinese studies for your bachelor's degree, though?
Because it was offered cheap, basically. So what happened is that because I was the only person in my school who took the Chinese lessons seriously, and the school that helped organize it had 3 scholarships to go, but because nobody else took it seriously, and I wasn't doing too great with my A levels, I was doing okay, but I wasn't going anywhere anytime soon, right? I just focused entirely on Mandarin as a gamble, and it paid off because they were like, surprise, we've got a scholarship, so you can come to Shijiazhuang for a year. But because of that, I was in the news, and the head of Chinese studies in Lampeter in South Wales saw me in the news and got in contact, and then he was like, why don't you come and do Chinese studies with us? And I did, like, instead of 3 years, we boiled it down to a year and a half because I'd already learned most of Mandarin, so I just had to do the history and politics courses,
History.
Yeah.
History in Chinese.
I know all of the. I used to know all of the Chao, the dynasties, but
Wow.
a long time
I
ago.
mean, pretty knowledgeable actually, because my history is not good at all.
The fun one's Yuan, Yuan Chao. It's the interesting one.
Yuan Chou,
Yeah.
Yuan Destiny. Wow, it's very challenging for me to talk to you now.
And
So look
intimidating.
at it's quite Look at career journey on LinkedIn. It is pretty interesting because you were doing teacher assistant in Shijiazhuang,
Yep.
then you were doing marketing in Shanghai.
Yep.
You found your own company.
Yep.
You did translator or translation sort of thing.
Yep.
Wow, your career seems to be always changing. To be honest, why would you have so many different work experiences?
Basically, the way I see it is that the jobs that I've been working in recently didn't really exist when I was younger, so I couldn't plan for them. So because I've sort of, when I was quite young, I kind of realized that the way that the job market was going was that it was changing a lot. And if I start, really focusing on something like doing an accounting degree or doing, really focusing on a really specific skill, there's a fair chance that that would get automated, or that job wouldn't exist, or it would change completely and I wouldn't want to work in it. So instead of focusing on like one super specific skill, I just focused on more broad skills like communication, languages, maths, how business generally works, how marketing kind of works, that kind of thing. And it's kind of meant that I haven't had I left university and then I was an accountant and then I'm accountant still. It means that I've kind of moved all over the place, basically, because as the job market changes, these jobs disappear or change, or might disappear at some point, so I want to kind of leave off on it. That's been my philosophy generally going through stuff, because also I don't want to just do one thing. I want to try and do lots of different things. It's more fun that way, right? It's a new challenge each time. I think I would go mad if I was an accountant, basically.
Wow. Have you ever thought about being a philosopher in the future?
Philosophers don't make much money. I think I've always thought about going into sort of more creative stuff, like, making videos, or I don't know, like making games, or writing, or that kind of thing. And one of those skills that I've kind of been focusing on a lot is writing. There's no place where being able to communicate clearly is not useful, right? I think I couldn't be a philosopher because I don't have any new ideas, right? But I like to think deeply about stuff.
Yeah, but it sounds pretty philosophical, because you've got lots of experience that can benefit people from any perspectives. If they want to make career change, or if they want to learn some new skills, that would be very valuable from your experience, I guess.
I think, the way the job market is now, people can't hyper focus on something. For
Oh,
example, if I really learn JavaScript, okay, actually, no, when I was younger, HTML was super popular, right? If I spent all my time focusing on HTML, now I'd basically be out of a job because nobody really uses it. So, if I really focused on, I don't know, traditional marketing, like, yeah, okay, I could pivot within the marketing space to digital marketing or whatever. But, if without that sort of knowledge of the principles from which everything else is like logically stems from, then that pivots super hard. So you see that with people who've learned something really specific. They've got a great job for about 5 years, and then AI comes and destroys it. Or or it's outsourced. Maybe is another thing in the UK. Yeah,
yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. I mean, it reminds me of my personal experience, actually. I were mostly doing sales job.
yeah,
Yeah, ChatGPT actually doesn't really have huge impact on me somehow, because I'm more like working on communication in
negotiate.
person. Yeah, negotiate. I think, yeah, that's part I feel like, okay, ChatGPT might not replace my work.
This is it. So it's like I think a lot of the time the sort of fundamentals that you learn for these jobs, that's more important than actually the minutia, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So like with sales, you're learning about communication, you're learning about negotiation, you're learning about networking, and all of these things you can't really automate away. Or if they do change massively, like, so for example, automated funnel marketing, we're sorting out email and lists and that kind of thing, the fundamental principles still apply. So it means that you can use it no matter what platform they're using, or no matter what situation you're in. If you're good at negotiating, you're good at
yeah,
negotiating. Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. But how could you pick up new skills quickly? That if you want to learn something, how long would it take you to get new skills?
It depends on the skill, right? But I think if you start from really fundamental, the real basis of something like negotiating, it's about making both people win, right? It's about making a win-win scenario. It's about finding out how far you can push stuff, how far how much you can give up in order to get what you're wanting, right? I think if you look at the real fundamentals of something, you can get like 80% of a new skill pretty quickly. I think there's always obviously time for practice and time for getting used to more technical things. Like, it would take me a long time to learn a programming language, for example. But if you understand the fundamentals of programming, then it speeds up that entire process. Does that make sense? It's the same
Yeah,
with languages, right? Languages, if you understand some fundamental principles, if you understand, word order, how word order works, or if you understand what an adjective is, right? Or if you understand how tone works, it kind of makes learning the more difficult technical stuff or learning other languages a lot easier if you understand those fundamentals.
yeah. Well, definitely you had the right to say that, because you're a master of learning languages.
I don't know about master.
Yeah, it just says master. Dash.
That's it.
Yeah,
But
周师傅. The reason why I said that is more like because how many languages can you speak?
well, 3 very fluently. Like, I speak English, Welsh, and Mandarin.
Yeah,
But then I speak maybe another 10 at sort of intermediate. Like if someone starts speaking to me and then suddenly I won't be able to understand. I have to stop and I have to be like, hold on a second. Let me think about how to put a sentence together. But I can usually like communicate, and then I can speak a little bit of quite a lot of others because it's always useful for ice breaking. So I did my MBA in international business because of this partially, is because if I meet people from other countries, I can usually say a couple of sentences in their language and it just breaks the ice instantly. I'm like the favorite person in the room, right?
Really, really inspired of studying MBA actually. I remember you can speak Hindi, Russian, Japanese, Chinese,
Well, it's not
Mandarin,
anymore. I've forgotten the Chinese, yeah.
Hindi, yeah. What other languages can you speak? I feel like I couldn't even remember that because it's a lot.
Generally speaking, I try and learn the larger ones if I can. So like Russian,
Rush.
Mandarin, Farsi, Arabic, a bit of. But then like, I always like. Sometimes I just have a feeling that I want to really focus on some really obscure language
Yeah,
that nobody knows and I'll never use. But that's more of a hobby than a skill, I think.
it's hobbies.
Yeah,
Well, your hobby is pretty. I mean,
interesting.
pretty impressive, yeah. But what made you be so into languages apart from like doing the open discussion with people sort of thing at university? Is more like related to business or
I think it was more just I like talking to people from other backgrounds. Like I think going to China so young kind of made me appreciate other cultures a bit better. Do you know what I mean? Like, we've always been bilingual here anyway because of Welsh, right? But if you grow up with both of them, it's not that interesting, right? But with Chinese, for example, it suddenly opened up a whole world of like experience that I wouldn't have otherwise had access to if I didn't speak
yeah,
Mandarin. Like I think going to China as somebody who just doesn't speak Chinese, it's probably a bit of an alienating experience. It's probably a bit lonely. But if you do speak Chinese, you're invited to everything. You'll eat food that you've never thought you'd eat. You'd speak to people and go places you never thought you'd go. And I think that kind of got me hooked. So now it's like, okay, well, what kind of experiences will I get if I speak that language, right? Or this language, I think that's what.
well, it still sounds challenging to me because I start pushing British culture somehow. Not really specifically related to food, but
Fair enough.
yeah, the other parts I really appreciate, like it's good manner,
Yeah.
eating manner, or it's kind of relaxing work-life balance. I love that because I feel like in China, it won't be that easy for you to get work-life balance if you are not intentional to have sort of ideas.
Yeah. I had a situation like this. So when I was in Changsha, when I first went to China after I graduated, I worked for a company. I won't name the names or anything, but it was a sort of tech company, and I worked in customer service. And my boss would get really angry with me because I wouldn't do fake overtime. So basically, is I finished at 5 because
Yeah,
that's when I'm paid to finish at 5. But then it'd be like, why don't you stay in? It looks bad. And I'm like, I'm going to go home and eat and sleep and rest and stuff. And they were like, oh no, we stay till like 9. We should wait until the boss has gone home. And I was like, why have you hired foreigners if you want to work like that? Do you know what I mean? I was like, I'm not doing that. Like, and she hated it. She hated it, and it didn't work out in the end.
yeah, definitely won't work out. But I mean, because it seems a big contrast.
It was a bit. I think it's different in the bigger cities in China. I think like in Shanghai or Beijing, it's a bit more relaxed. But it was in Changsha, and everyone was working really hard. But they weren't doing that much work in their fake overtime. They were just looking at stuff on the internet. So I was like, why are you pretending?
Well,
Yeah.
oh, sounds pretty. Yeah, sounds pretty stressed out somehow. Would you feel like running out quite often in China while you work there?
Well, I think with that job, I did feel a bit burnt out because it was a bit ridiculous. If that makes sense. Like, I don't mind working hard. I'll work all the hours in the day if there's a good reason for it.
Yeah.
If the reason is to make myself look good for somebody who's not even there, what's the point, right? If they've already gone home, why is everyone pretending to work, right? But then in the job when I was working in marketing in Shanghai, it was a lot more. It was a lot better. There was overtime, and there was like sales meetings, KTV, right? Going on trips and stuff. But
Wow.
that's not really work.
I was about to ask you that part of
Yeah.
experience actually. You were doing like digital marketing.
Yes.
I found it's pretty challenging to work in marketing in
Yes.
China because lots of social media platforms. And how do you find that experience?
Difficult, obviously, because I think like it was fine because the company was registered in the free trade zone in Shanghai. It meant that we could get like a license for publishing
Yeah,
on WeChat, and most of our work was on WeChat. It was before Douyin, TikTok really took off,
yeah.
but it was difficult because it was like pay to win almost. It was like, you know, you can get a good article together and it might go viral, but most of the time, if you put an article out, like 6 people are going to read it, because also we were a B2B business. So it was a bit, you know, there wasn't a huge market we could reach. We were selling spark plugs, very specific parts of a car. And maybe like the people who would follow that app were, you know, like people who run like places to fix cars. But there wasn't this broad appeal, so it was quite difficult to do the marketing there. And also, all of the articles were written in Mandarin, and all of the
Oh,
yeah.
did you
So
write it?
I would write bits of it, and then we would send it off to someone to rewrite it into better Mandarin, and then I'd be forced to check it, which was a bit ridiculous because I'd be like, I can't read most of this. It's quite specific, right?
Yeah,
I think, and then apart from that, the other stuff that was good though was the more person-to-person marketing in China. That's a bit
yeah,
easier, I think, than it is here. We went to a big exhibition in called I can't remember. It was in Beijing. It was huge. It was in, you know, the big exhibition hall.
yeah,
International. It was like automotive exhibition in China, and that was a lot easier because, you know, I could use Mandarin and people would be, oh look, that's fun. Wow, wow. You know, they'd stand around and I'd talk about business with them. Yeah.
pretty amazing. I feel like the most challenging part for you to work in China is not really language related. It's more like business culture or something.
It's I understand where the business culture comes from, right? It's the
All right.
right. It really stems from the way China's culture is set up, and also because I think of the recent history of China. A lot of people are very anxious about falling back down a social ladder that they've just climbed up. So, you know, if your, you know, grandparents worked in a field and then your parents worked in a factory and then you managed to get a job in Shanghai in marketing and it's quite stable, I can understand completely the complete like stress of that situation. And you know, you do also have the whole, you know, you have to have lunch with your boss and you have to go out for drinks with clients, and I understand where it comes from, but I think you learn quite quickly when working in China to just kind of play the game. Like you just, it's part of the. I'm not going to change the system. I'd play the game where I had to, but if it was really ridiculous, I would maybe say no, and then they'd be annoyed at me. But
Yeah,
you know,
there are quite kind of rules that if you want to work in that environment, and
yes, absolutely.
probably like a chess game if you want to.
I think as well, yeah, it's quite strategic. But as well, the same thing is because obviously I think I was the only foreigner in the office apart from the CEO, who's actually from Wales as well. Shout out to Keith if he's around. Thanks for giving me a job. He, it was like they kind of also gave me a bit of a pass from that kind of thing. Like if I didn't understand something, maybe my boss would be like, Joe, just so you know X, Y, and Z, and explain it to me. But yeah, I think I got a bit of a pass, which kind of helped, but it was still a bit too much, maybe.
Well, yeah, that sounds pretty just kind of incredible for you to work in China for
Yeah,
that period of time,
it was amazing.
especially Mandarin, Shanghainese. I didn't even know it's previously when I talked to you. I didn't know like how could you acquire new skills in terms of Shanghainese.
Actually, in the office, we would speak a mix of like Mandarin and Shanghai Hua. And
Yeah.
obviously, if you see it, there's something with China, and that's like if you see like Bairen use Fang Yan, like people go mad for like Fang Yan. Like I remember when I was in Changsha, I learned like, hey, 小鸭子,你干么子课? And people would be like, you know, tripping over themselves, like, wow, you speak amazing Changsha Hua. And I was like, I don't speak any Changsha Hua. I know one sentence, but it helps break the ice, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. Well, actually, just quick comment from Joe Wells, my friend. Just regarding the previous discussion we had, and he said 100% agree with that point on communication.
Absolutely. There's no, if
So,
you communicate clearly, you'll end up with a reasonable job. Like if you're a good communicator, because you can negotiate, like everything else kind of stems from that.
Yeah.
Because all work is working with other people. So if you're good at working with other people and communicating things, I think, it makes everything else easier.
I agree. Especially kind of like you can talk to anyone, which any languages.
Can help.
So then you also like end up previously ended up being a founder of business,
Yes.
but more like language related as well.
Yeah. So basically, is after I graduated from university the first time, I had my Chinese studies degree. I went to China, and that's when I worked in Changsha for like 3 months, and it didn't really work out because of a culture clash, and my boss at the time didn't really like it. No comment on that, of course. But then after that, I got a job in marketing. But after about 2 years or so in Shanghai in marketing, I kind of got quite tired, if that makes sense. I got tired of office politics, which was mostly fine, but being foreign in a foreign land, it's not always the most easy, relaxing thing to do, right? And it would be like going out drinking with friends a bit too much, and it's just a bit unhealthy, and I just got quite tired. So I decided I'd come home and try and start a career, because obviously working in China, you don't always have the stability, right, that you could otherwise have at home because of Tianzheng, right, because of visas. My visa was on a year rolling basis. It meant that I could only ever really plan 1 year ahead, because at any moment I could lose my visa.
Oh, really?
If I lost my job, I'd lose my visa. I have to go home in 3 months. It meant that you can't just hang around for a year and find another job. Also, every time I moved, you have to go through a whole process by going to the police station and registering in the police station. And it's fine, right? You play the game, but it just made everything really difficult and stressful, more than it had to be. So I came home and I was like, well, I've got all these skills and stuff. What am I going to do? So first I ended up working in a language centre in Llandudno, near to where I'm from. I was just a general trainee manager, something. I was doing everything basically for about 6 months, and then I decided I'd do an MBA. So I figured I'd do an MBA in international business because it kind of makes sense, right? But I wanted to use that MBA and the skills and the sort of models that you learn in the MBA to then do my own thing. So over the years of teaching myself these different languages, I kind of worked out there's a pattern to languages. Like, it doesn't matter what language you're learning, there's ways of optimizing that path through learning a language. Like, it doesn't matter what language you're learning, you always tend to end up learning really simple words first. Words like and, because, or like this, that, here, there is not. These really basic words. Then I figured that if you used a frequency analysis to approach vocabulary in a language, you can actually learn quite a lot quite quickly. So, like, for example, with Mandarin, maybe 50 words is about half of the language statistically.
Whoa. Well, I don't even know about it.
Yeah, well, this is it. I tried to set up a business around it, but the same applies to all languages, actually. If you get the top 100 words, you tend to have about half of a language in, and the rest is just filler words like nouns and adjectives and verbs. And then from that, I kind of came to an approach that I could set up, I could start a language teaching course online, or an app or something. It was called Pi. I set it up with a co-founder after my MBA. So the MBA was there to give me all of the business skills that I needed in order to do that myself properly, to give it a good go. We were around for about 5 years, but it didn't work out in the end, because basically 2 years of that was COVID. It was just me, my co-founder, and a developer, and it wasn't a big enough team really to build it properly. So we spent years and years and years trying really hard to get some money together to get this thing, an MVP, finished and out, right? So we could get a basic version of the product. We got a load of the back end stuff done, but because of where we are, we basically, after COVID, the investment markets were shockingly bad, right? And they still are not great for early stage tech companies. We just couldn't get investment. So we did get a lot of financial help. So we got a lot of help from MSpark, which is a tech science park up in North Wales. We got a lot of help from Bangor University. We got a lot of help from lots of places, but it just wasn't enough to get that developer team in to actually finish building the product. So earlier this year, we ran out of money, and we were wrapping it up. Can't work on it anymore. Don't have the time or energy. And then I ended up with a job in another company that we did some work with. So They're called Animated Technologies, and we're working on at the moment is a VR language learning app
Yeah.
kind of thing. So I'm using my skills I got from that to help Animated Tech as a business, but also to sort out other projects, but also to build this new language learning app. So it's not a waste of time. I landed okay. I spent about 3 months working in co-op, but
Wow,
yeah,
it's fun. This is a really fantastic story I've never heard before. Just kind of
tiring.
your
Word.
the real experience, but it doesn't seem to be real.
Yeah,
I feel like you must have lots of roller coaster moments, it's up and down. It's when
all
I
the
get
time, all the time. It was like it's like I think that's my entire working life, to be quite honest. I don't think I've ever had a really stable job like the one I've currently got, but I still haven't finished my probation period, so who knows? But yeah, it's like I think because of where I live, so I live on the north coast of Wales, right? And jobs aren't. There's not many jobs here. There are
Yeah,
jobs, but
exactly.
yeah, it means that you just have to kind of do whatever's there, and it's great if you can find a job that fits you, like I have.
Yeah.
But again, at the same time, it's always the possibility of it going away, and I don't want to move to England, so
Yeah, it's fair enough. Well,
yeah,
tell your secret though.
yeah,
I'm actually recruiting in Cardiff.
yeah, yeah. No, I saw
So so I can tell what you said is kind of true from my end.
yeah, yeah.
It's
I
not
think
easy. Yeah.
Cardiff is easier than here as well. Like this is like the opposite end of the country to Cardiff. So, like it's like Wales isn't exactly the centre of attention for isn't exactly the centre of attention for Britain. But then also like even in Wales, North Wales, like Anglesy's about as far from Cardiff as you can get. So
Yeah. But you must have sort of different feelings from being a founder to an employee. Actually, initially,
yes,
employee, founder, employee. Oh, who
yeah.
knows what can happen next? But
Who
yeah,
knows? I think it's okay because it means that I can kind of have a bit of a. The thing is my boss has actually been really good, and she does let me kind of do stuff that improves the company that that isn't necessarily within my job role. So it means that I can take a lot of the skills that I've got as a founder and then apply them to this company that I work in, which is overall good for everyone. Because if the company's doing well, then my job's secure, there's opportunities for moving upwards for me. I think that I've got a bit of creative freedom in my current role, but also I don't have to worry about taxes as much. So I don't have to worry about raising money so much. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
yeah. It seems like you'll be feeling a bit stressed.
Yes.
Come
A
as
lot.
before.
The last 6 months of my company before it fell apart, it was like really stressful because we were trying to raise 150,000, like a basic seed fund round, and it was so stressful because you'd be speaking to investors in the Dev Bank in Wales and that kind of thing. They'd be taking like 6 months, a year to make a decision, and it was so stressful. But it's all better now. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes even work for a company could be stressful.
oh yeah, there's still stressful moments, but I think
Different,
if I fail, it doesn't mean the entire company collapses. If that makes sense, it's not as stressful.
different level of stress.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Level A, level B, level C. Oh, yeah, you're on the top end.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So, but still, you're kind of still doing language related work. So
Yeah,
we are education. We are still related to language.
absolutely. Yeah,
So yeah, it seems like your passion.
yeah. Well, it landed. It landed okay. I think that's why I was taken onto this job as well, was because the person who runs Anna, if she's about, don't
Yeah,
think she's on a Sunday. It, I think she saw that I had a skill with language and saw that she was building stuff and just matched the two. So like she could see that what I knew from Pi and from my previous experience could be useful for the company in a lot of different ways. So like I was saying, if you've got these skills, you can kind of transfer them across to lots of places, even if you don't have a very specific skill from that, if that makes sense. Like I wouldn't train to be a translator. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Let's be honest, the work's not great, and the machine's going to get rid of that one pretty soon.
yeah,
But having been able to speak in the languages still actually applies to other jobs and positions anyway. So I think it's the safest you can be in the current job environment.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. Well, just comment from my friend
Yeah.
Joe.
So I just saw that comment. Do you want to read out?
Yeah, he can read it actually.
Okay. North Wales is hard model. When I was working on my startup, I was shocked with the amount of support for London compared to Wales. Now, I got to see all the statistics of this. So out of the entire UK, Wales only gets about 3% of the startup investment funding. 3%. And that doesn't even line up with the size of our economy compared to the rest of the UK. Like Wales is consistently underfunded. But in Wales as well, 80% of that funding was in the Cardiff capital region. If you're outside of that, I worked out the maths on it, and I think we had about 10, 15 startups in North Wales that were competing for about 300 grand of funding on average. So very difficult.
It's very competitive market for
Yes.
sure. Yeah.
But I couldn't do it anywhere else because, home.
But yeah, and also, why did you only choose to stay or work in Wales instead of England?
Well, that's a spicy question.
Ah,
I think it basically is growing up in Wales and my job experience in Wales. There's clearly not very many jobs here, and I feel it would be disingenuous to complain about it and then not do something about it. So, if I said, "Oh, there's no jobs in Wales, but I like living in Wales, but I'm just going to leave." I mean, I understand why people do it, but my thinking was like, well, I'll try and do it here because at least if it works out here, those jobs are here, and then other people can have jobs here, if that makes sense. So, principle, I'd say, but maybe I just like stressful things. Who knows?
oh, that's a very spicy answer. Or I would say because you don't want to lose Welsh language environment.
Yeah, exactly. If I move away and had kids away, then they wouldn't necessarily be able to speak Welsh, right? So
Yeah, well, it's kind of import culture for you.
yes, yeah.
So, which languages do you like the most?
They're all nice. They all have like a flavour to them, right? I think, but the more you speak them, the less the flavour's there. So like, I'm so used to Mandarin, it just feels quite normal speaking in Chinese to people. But I think Russian's a nice language. It's quite expressive. It's got some really good specific verbs that I quite enjoy. I think, I don't know, Arabic can be quite nice in its own way. I think I do really like the sound of Finnish. Finnish is like it sounds like singing. I really enjoy Finnish for the sound of it. But I think all languages have got a nice thing about them, if that makes sense. I don't dislike any of them really, except maybe French, but that's a joke. I really don't like Changsha. No. It's all nice.
I don't understand that neither. Just challenging.
Yeah. Difficult, but nice, rewarding.
Yeah, but I mean, compared to the languages you can speak from different countries, well, in comparison to the different dialects in China, which part would you feel like more comfortable with, or would you like to speak more dialects or?
So Fangyan, right? The way I see Fangyan is that like, if you can't understand somebody else's speaking, then it's a kind of a different language, right? It's hard to say like German and English are dialects of the same Germanic language, right? But okay, Fangyan, right? I think I'm most comfortable in Mandarin because that's what I've been using mostly. That being said, I do have quite a warm, nostalgic feeling to Changsha and
Really?
Shanghai Hua because it was like spoken around me a lot at a good time in my life, if that makes sense. Stressful but good. So I associate lots of good memories with like Shanghai Hua and like and like Changsha Hua. I think Cantonese is quite a fun language. Hey?
Cantonese.
Yeah, it's quite expressive. Lei ho, lei ga gamut, yeah. I can swear a lot, but I'm not going to do it on the live stream. Don't worry.
Just I understand.
Yeah, I quite like Cantonese. Is quite expressive. I like the slang of Cantonese. It's quite fun. Dongbei Hua, I'm going to be honest, I've only ever seen it in people fighting each other or in comedy sets. So I think
it's a good impression.
I like Dongbei Hua. I just don't understand most of it. So And I think it's one of those ones where it's close enough to Mandarin that people can kind of understand it if they speak Mandarin, and they can do
Yeah.
impressions of it, and they can talk about comedy shows. But because I'm a foreigner, it was just too far, if that makes sense. It was not understandable at all for me. So
Yeah.
people would always be like, "Hey, check out this Dongbei video," and I'd be watching, like, I felt really biao. I didn't understand a thing that they were,
Wow. It was a very fantastic journey after you.
busy, long,
Yeah.
stressful.
Stressful language journey. But yeah, this is another comment from Joe. There's so much talent in Wales that ends up leaving. Yeah, that's true. What I
So
found when I did recruitment, yeah.
in Welsh, you can say if someone's gone lawr alone, like down the lane, it means they've kind of left Wales to go and work, and they'll come back eventually. Like Welshness is Wales has had a brain drain issue ultimately since the Middle Ages, because obviously we were conquered. It meant that a lot of our sort of middle class and upper classes were integrated into British upper class, the English upper class, right? So it meant that a lot of talented people left, and it meant that there was no reinvestment into the area. So it meant that like there are lots of very clever people in Wales, just like every other country. I don't think we're specifically very clever, but we have clever people like every other group of people. But because of how the economy's structured in Wales, it's really hard for people to find a job that suits them, especially in the north. Cardiff's changed a lot, but even in the south, it was still a real issue up until the 80s and 90s. And I think the devolved governments, for all their issues, actually are trying to take steps to fix this by reinvesting into business in these areas. So it actually does create jobs and people can stay. And I think we're one of the earlier generations where the devolution and the reinvestment into Wales has begun actually taking an effect and creating jobs. So when my dad was younger, he had to leave to go to Manchester to go and work and then come back. And his dad had to leave to go to Liverpool. And there's like generations and generations of this. But I'm the first one who's actually managed to get a reasonable middle class job that's not in agriculture or mining or fishing, that can actually stay in the area. And I think that's partially because of devolution. And this understanding that Wales's economy can't just be extractive. So, for a lot of Welsh history, our economy was basically built around taking out resources, taking stuff out of Wales and selling it into England. Like the coal mines in the south were connected to the railways to Bristol and stuff. In the north, it was access to Holyhead, to the port. That's the reason why they built the railway and the road and the bridge and stuff in North Wales. And I think that's only really beginning to change now, but we've got like 800 years of economic vandalism to fix. So, and yeah, as Joe said, humbleness does play a role in not getting the word out. But also, we don't control our international branding, part of Britain. So,
Wow. You know what? What I'm thinking about is like I'm actually in the Welsh Museum.
St. Fagans, yeah. Well, you've got to know where you're coming from to know where you're going, right?
But not many people know about it, I suppose.
I think it depends. I think it's like in Wales, if you stay in Wales and you have an education and stuff, I think people do eventually come around to learning about it. But most people aren't in that class and aren't in that educational level. But even then, that being said, lots of people do know about it. But it's about the thing is we don't communicate it to people. So people who come to Wales, for example, don't really know why Wales is like it is.
Yeah.
And humbleness does play a role, absolutely. But
yeah, like myself, I think I'm kind of foreigner here because it's what you experience in China as well. I was trying to understand carve culture or carve history because they have a carve museum as well.
Yeah.
Still, it's really not easy to connect with culture if I wasn't born here.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's quite. We can be quite inclusive. I think exclusive. That's the word. I think inclusive, exclusive. We can be quite exclusive, but I think it's because more than anything, for the past 800 years or so, our culture has been quite on the defense. Do you know what I mean? It's about protecting what we've still got.
Yeah.
Whereas now, because of modernization and internationalization, and people coming to Wales from all around the world, and we're slowly getting a bit of a brand together, like with the guys from Wrexham, I think it's kind of changing now to be a bit more inclusive. But we've still got a long history of this is us, stay away, kind of thing. It's quite difficult to communicate to people from outside.
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad all of my colleagues couldn't speak Welsh. If so, I feel like maybe some kind of barrier, culture barrier.
I think it's like any place. Like if I'm in Shanghai and my co-workers are speaking Shanghainese, I think it can feel exclusive, but if you make an effort to learn it, people generally are super positive about it, right?
Oh,
There is a Chinese lady who learned Welsh because she lives in Bethesda, I think, and she learnt it, and she was all over the news and stuff because people were like, "Wow, look how amazing is this?"
yeah. But I was wondering, like, what sort of environment could she use, like speaking Welsh? It's probably just in North Wales, I guess.
No, the south has got many Welsh speakers as well, but they're just more rural. So I think actually the county with the most Welsh speakers is Carmarthenshire. So that's like quite far south, right? But Pembrokeshire's got Welsh speakers. Our developer was a Welsh speaker, and he's from Pontardawe, which is just outside Swansea. And there's areas of Cardiff where there are Welsh speakers, but it's one of those things. If you don't speak it, you don't tend to have that network of people who speak it in those areas. Like one of my friends, his girlfriend was from Caerphilly, which I always thought was no Welsh speakers there, but apparently there are. There are Welsh schools all over. People have gone to Welsh school. It's just about if you know one and then networking within that network, and it's a very handy network to have in Wales. Absolutely.
Wow. Yeah, you never know what you don't know. Just that's true. It's funny though. Like Welsh language could be very popular. I mean, from your personal experience, would you encourage other people to learn new languages as well?
Absolutely. I mean, it's never a waste of time, right? Even languages that I thought I would never use sometimes come out of nowhere to help me out a little bit. So I'll give you an example. I was in giving a talk the other day, and a girl came up to me to ask me about job opportunities, and we were talking about language stuff. And I was like, "Oh, well, where are you from?" And she was like, "Oh, I'm from Iran." I was like, "Oh, man, Farsi ham yod migrim." Like, I also speak a bit of Farsi. And she was like, blown away. And added on LinkedIn, and then I'm trying to help her at the moment, sort of get a internship in one of the companies in MSpark. So it's like you can, even if it's just learning with fun. Also, it's a fun thing. If you manage to express yourself in another language to someone and they understand, you can have lots of fun. We've all seen the videos where that guy, what's his name, Xiao Ma, New York City, he speaks Chinese to people in a restaurant and then records it's a bit cringe, but but at the same time, it is quite fun. If I go to a Chinese takeaway, for example, I'm like, hey, 给我那个中文的菜单吧. Like,
Ah,
中意点那个菜. Like it's quite fun, It's enjoyable, even if it's not necessarily useful. But it's always.
well, it is useful. It is very obvious that it is useful for you.
I find it as well that there's a big misunderstanding of usefulness when it comes to languages. So you see this a lot in Wales. People why would I learn Welsh? Why don't I learn Chinese? And I'm like, well, I've learned Chinese and I actually use more Welsh day to day, right? People often associate like the usefulness of a language being about how many speakers there are. But if I speak Spanish, I'm maybe 1 in 10 million people this side of Europe who speak Spanish, right? But if I speak a really specific language, I can be the only person who can bridge that gap, right? So if I speak, for example, Shanghai Hua, I'm one of 2 people who could make videos and make a lot of money because there's that German guy who speaks Shanghai Hua, right? I could be like 1 or 2 people who can do that. And that's a really specific skill. It just means that you own that smaller market, so to speak. So maybe there's a company somewhere that wants somebody who can speak English and Shanghai Hua, like Shanghainese. Is it in English? Yeah, Shanghainese. If you're the only person there, you'll have that job. You can own that market for jobs, so to speak. So I think as well, if people want to learn a language, don't just learn the biggest, most spoken one. Go and look for smaller languages as well. Like you can own that market.
This is great perspective. Never heard of before.
It's like it's like in Wales. So currently the Welsh government's doing a lot of stuff with Japan.
Oh, right.
And there's a Japanese lady who speaks Welsh, and now the government's hired her to be that middle person because she speaks Japanese and Welsh, right? So you see a lot of people saying, "Oh, well, don't learn the smaller languages, learn the big ones." But the smaller ones are a lot more fun.
What? That's pretty impressive.
It is, yeah.
Well, in that case, what are top tips for you, or probably top 3 tips or 5 tips of learning new languages from your perspective?
A few tips are learn IPA, right? Learn the International Phonetic Alphabet, because then you can make notes about the sounds of a language without having to try and cram it into your own writing system. So imagine trying to learn Chinese without pinyin, right? You'd be there, you can't express tone, but even then, pinyin's not perfect, right? But there's one called IPA, which is quite scientific for writing out how something's pronounced. Learn that, because that makes learning the sounds of any language a lot easier and clearer. Because you can go on Wiktionary and check the pronunciation of words instead of having it roughly. This is how you say it in your languages, like scientific. Secondly, I'd say when it comes to vocabulary, look at frequency. Look at how common words actually are. So words that people think are common are often not very common at all. So I can remember with the HSK, with the Hanyu Shuiping Kaoshi, like that exam, some of the first words you learn are like tiezi and like mao, like aubergine and cat. And how often do you actually talk about aubergines and cats? Like colours is another one. How often do you actually talk about colours? Not very often. The good words are like this, that, think, who, what, to be, there is, come, go. These are super useful words, but if you can go online and you can find frequency lists for languages usually. Look at vocabulary that way, because that means you can actually learn more useful words quickly, which means you can speed up that process of learning a language. And I think thirdly is to learn a bit of grammar. Like obviously grammar's not very fun, let's be honest. Well, I like it, but that's a weird thing rather than a general thing. I think if you learn a bit of grammar, it helps people explain how a language works to you clearly, like the rules. You don't have to kind of guess. This is an issue with Duolingo and stuff, is that they throw sentences at you, but unless you explain how the rules work, you won't necessarily understand it. So if you just learn a bit of basic grammar, like what kind of words, like adjectives, nouns, etc., postpositions, prepositions, these basic words, then actually learning all languages gets easier, because you can read a grammar book and understand how the language is structured and formed, right?
Very powerful tips.
So there's 10 years worth of studying
10
down,
years.
boiled down into 3 tips for you.
That's kind of amazing. You can break down into 3 points from a 10 years experience.
Yeah, boiled down.
That I think everybody might understand that principles of learning new languages.
Yeah,
they may not be consistent with their learning habits. Something.
Absolutely. Well, learning habits is something understanding your learning habits is something that should happen naturally anyway. Like you know, okay, maybe writing down a list of words and staring at them for an hour, this doesn't feel like I'm learning anything, right? You know, if you experiment a bit with how you learn, then that process of learning becomes easier, obviously. But the important thing as well is making sure that what you learn is also kind of optimized a bit. Don't spend hours trying to learn the word for aubergine when you could learn the word for what, right? You could learn shema, like super useful shema, like what, or you could learn like tieds. Which one would you learn first? Which one do you spend an hour trying to remember, right?
什么？
啥？
什么？什么？好，早上好。
好。
I really want to kind of ask a question from my hometown dialect, but it's kind of like, well, probably in Mandarin actually. 你吃了多少本书？
你吃了多少什么？
多少本书？
本书是 potato 吗？
No, 本书. It's kind of like
how many books have you read?
Yeah, but yeah, it's kind of from funny style. It's like 你吃了多少本书 like keep eating. Yeah. But in English, probably if you translate into English, sounds a bit weird.
这个安是那个另外一个人是聪明是吧？
聪明。
Is that kind of hinting that the other person's been reading too much?
Yeah, I mean, not too much. It's kind of like a lot. Yeah. I mean, when I talk to you, I feel that way.
吃了多少本书？
你吃了多少本书？
今天3本。
Nice answer.
直接回答有点搞笑。
Yeah. Yes. Very spicy answer. So, well, do you have any tips for learning?
Dyslexia, right?
Oh,
Dyslexia is really bad for writing systems that aren't phonetic.
yeah.
So English, a terrible language if you're dyslexic. Awful. Like, why is there a G in the word though? Why is there why is there a GH in the word though? It's awful because English isn't written in a phonetic way. Now, French is another example of this. You can't necessarily work out how something's pronounced by the way it's written. Chinese is an example of this. I think the way dyslexia shows up in languages is different depending on how it's written. So with Chinese dyslexics, if I remember rightly, they get mixed up with radicals. So maybe they put radicals in the wrong order, or they write go like with the dwa on one side or dwa on the other. I think that they get mixed up like that. In English, spelling's awful because it's not phonetic, but dyslexia isn't quite the same issue in Welsh, for example. Welsh looks complicated to English speakers, but actually it's quite phonetic. You know, a is written with an a. We never add a GH or a P or whatever it is that English does to stuff. But the one place where it's not phonetic is to do with the letter Y, which can be a or a E, depending on like where in the word it is. And that's the one that dyslexic people get mixed up in with Welsh. So actually, if you can write the language as you pronounce dyslexia is a lot less of an issue, is my understanding from the research. But I got a laugh react there from Joe.
Yeah, I believe,
Yeah,
believe Joe Wells doesn't expect so specific answer from you.
yeah. I think don't. I would say with dyslexia, it's difficult. But if you choose languages which are written phonetically, it should be at least easier. Don't learn French. Don't learn English. Don't learn Chinese maybe, but learn something like Czech or Russian. They're quite clear. They're quite good.
Right. So,
Yeah.
So they're kind of certain. They're kind of allergic to certain languages.
Yeah, essentially, it's to do with writing systems, and it's usually because dyslexic people generally don't struggle any more than normal people to learn to speak a language. It's more to do with writing or reading, right? And basically, the simpler the writing system, the less bits you've got to slip up on. If you've got a complicated, completely irregular writing system, like in English, like why is there a B in dat or a B in lamb? Obviously, people, like even people without dyslexia, get slipped up on that stuff. You know.
Awesome. I almost feel like the crit pivot should have changed to be like interview with expert of language.
I don't have I've got no formal qualifications. I've got HSK4, but I'm not.
All right.
Yeah, I agree with Mrs. Young.
All right. I found it's difficult to find like-minded people who are passionate about foreign language. They don't bother to speak a new language that will barely be used in reality.
I think that's quite fair. I think it's the same with people with maths, right? I think it's like most people don't really use foreign languages day to day, or they don't really use maths day to day, or they don't really use watercolors day to day. But I think you can appreciate it from an intellectual position. And I think that it makes life a bit more interesting, to be quite honest. And yeah, most people won't be into it, and that's fine because most people aren't into watercolors. Most people aren't into poetry. Most people aren't into lots of things, and you just have to find the right people and connect with them on LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn. It's fine. Nice. Well, speaking of like meeting people on LinkedIn, I'm quite happy that I met you in person firstly instead of making LinkedIn. Otherwise, I feel like, okay, who is Pistachio? Never gonna talk to you. Never met you in person.
Yeah, it's easier. I think I prefer meeting people in person. I think you can get better conversation out of people. I think, let's be honest, LinkedIn is not the most fun place to be. You know, even out of all of the social media places, it's not the most fun social media platform. But I think it's good for connecting with people professionally once you've already met them. And also,
Yeah.
there's nothing worse than some random person who you've never met with no mutual connections adding you, because instantly you think that they're there for selling you something.
Well, yeah. I won't say like I wouldn't say I won't sell you anything in future. Just in
No
case.
I don't mind being sold stuff, but I generally want to meet people first or speak to them first. You know,
那缘分
对缘分就是
要看缘分。
不是缘分是关系吧？
关
关系
Okay, that's back to the very
嗯，
culture stuff.
一
Well,
真是
actually,
的
I met Joe Wells in person. I met in person, so that's why I think we're kind of active on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine because we've met in person. So, but if it was random, I'd maybe be like, I don't know who this person is.
Well, so happy about this live stream. It's kind of like so different from the previous live streams I did. It's more, it's just more language discussion. It's more topics I'm personally interested as well.
Yeah, I think it's quite a pleasant discussion, quite fun. It's been nice
Yeah,
chatting with people. It's always fun to
Nice.
talk about stuff I'm interested in. My
that's
favorite
so
topic, me. Yeah.
Well, that's good. I'm glad that you feel that way.
I can tell you've been in Britain long enough to know that.
Okay.
Like, I'm glad you feel that way. That's a very
You're a good egg. Pistachio. Thank you, Joe. That's my friend. Well, thank you so much for today's live stream.
excellent. Thank you.
Pretty much we're gonna wrap up this discussion. I'm quite happy. It's quite interesting to see your ceilings. Actually, it's good decoration, almost like
Lights, the stars.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very positive environment.
My girlfriend chose them, so
Nice, nice girlfriend.
it's great. She's actually hiding out of the corner at the moment.
Oh, good. Well, sorry to interrupt your
That's okay.
Sunday.
Fine. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, nice. Thanks for a professional microphone as well. It's not really visible, but sound quality is nice as well.
Good. I mean, the camera's awful, to be honest. Maybe next time I get a new camera, but like for now, I've got a good mic at least.
Yeah, we're gonna try next time.
I'll join you all next time. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of Sunday, and hope you have a great week next week.
You too. And thanks again, Joe, as well.
All right, thank you, my friend.
Everyone.
Joe, always supportive.